Chris Hedges' piece is called Trump's War on America. And here's what he said. Fascists historically are surprisingly candid about the world they intend to create. The most ominous warning to date from our homegrown fascists is the latest presidential memo. Countering Domestic Terrorism and Organized Political Violence is what it's titled. It accuses any critic of law enforcement, ICE, the American empire, capitalism, the Christian right, the persecution of immigrants, and those that decry discrimination based on race and gender, as well as those who question white male patriarchy, described as, quote, traditional American views on family, religion, and morality. It accuses anyone who's critical of all that of fomenting violent revolution. So the way that you get liberals to act like this is not a big deal and to back down and just to be the absolute doormats that liberals are in America is to say, oh no, we're only going after violent extremists. Well, what is defined as violent extremists? Oh, anyone who's critical of basically anything that Trump likes. And, they use careful wording. They say anyone who's critical of traditional American views on family, religion, and morality. That sounds nice, right? But what they mean by traditional is a man controlling a woman who is a trad wife who lives in the kitchen. She can choose to be barefoot. She does not have to be barefoot. They'll allow her to have some comfy house slippers of some sort. So, there are some caveats, some perks in here, okay? With being the trad wife, you do nowadays get those house slippers. Before, fucking no slippers anywhere to be seen, okay? So let's not act like we haven't advanced in this country. Those house slippers you ever walked in some of those? They're fucking heaven, I tell you. But yeah, so basically, if you're critical of any of those things that I just listed, it counts as fomenting violent revolution. So roughly, I'm going to give a percentage, 99.6% of everything this show has ever said would be considered fomenting violent revolution and therefore illegal under Trump's new memo. The memo, typical of the self-serving narratives favored by Trump, ignores. It talks about left-wing violence, such as the killing of Charlie Kirk, which by everything I've seen is not a violent left-winger, but whatever. Even if it were, there's a tiny minuscule number of left-wing violent attacks compared to right-wing violent attacks in this country. The memo, typically of the self-serving narratives of Trump, ignores the murder by a Christian nationalist of Democratic Minnesota state legislator and Speaker of the Minnesota House, Melissa Hortman, and her husband, and the attempted murder of State Senator John Hoffman and his wife. I'm sure it also leaves out the attack on Nancy Pelosi and her husband, taking a hammer to his head and fracturing his skull, and many others. Also, they like to point to the assassination attempts on Donald Trump as proof of other left-wing attacks, even though the guy that, hit Trump's ear, there's no proof that he was a left-winger. Instead, he seemed like he literally had looked up ways to shoot at various politicians, including Biden. The idea that he was some kind of left-winger, they've brought forward no evidence of that. The memo brazenly inverts the rule of law. It turns the law into an instrument of injustice. It uses the decorum of federal agencies, the courts, and trials to legalize state crimes. It is grounded in magical thinking, bizarre conspiracy theories, and a paranoia that sees the most tepid acts, dissent or criticism, as treason. Universal innocence. Alexander, gonna have trouble with this one. Solzhenitsyn also gave rise to the universal failure to act. Maybe they won't take you. Maybe it will all blow over. The majority sit quietly and dare to hope. Since you aren't guilty, then how can they arrest you? It's a mistake. Yeah, it is interesting that people think they can't be, still to this day, think they can't be arrested when they're innocent. Look at Julian Assange. You could absolutely be arrested when you're innocent. It happens all the time. Mumia Abu-Jamal, for one. The idea that, and every whistleblower that has ever revealed the truth about the U.S. empire, although some of them are just assassinated, so you don't have to bother with arresting them. Chris Hedges continues, so totalitarian regimes promulgate broad security decrees from Stalin's Article 70 to the Nazis' Malicious Practices Act to give themselves the sweeping powers to indiscriminately target anyone. The memo, Trump's memo, lays out in chilling detail what I assumed in my column, "We are all Antifa now." was behind the Trump administration's designation of Antifa as a terrorist group. The designation allows the state to brand all dissidents as supporters of Antifa and prosecute them as terrorists. So basically, you just call something terrorism or terrorist organization, and then you can go after anybody who has similar ideals or has ever said anything positive about Antifa or has said positive things about stuff Antifa believes, such as stopping fascism. It's a very easy, like, oh, well, you just connect the dots, he said the same thing Antifa says, and then it gives you a reason to arrest him. This is to be a preemptive war. It will be waged against those individuals like James Comey, John Bolton, George Soros, Reid Hoffman, and institutions, including the Democratic Party, which Stephen Miller has labeled a terrorist organization, universities and the media, which threaten Trump's absolute grip on power. Most of you know that the people listed there, James Comey, John Bolton, George Soros, are not good people. They are part and parcel of a absolutely bloodthirsty U.S. empire that has destroyed the lives of millions, both around the world and at home, considering we are the world's largest prison state. So it doesn't mean they're good people, but they're still part of the ruling elite that Trump doesn't like and that don't like Trump. So Trump goes after perhaps his most powerful enemies in many ways first, and once he can get them out of the way or sidelined, or sometimes he'll put up test balloons to see whether they're going to push back at all, he then can go after far less significant and less powerful enemies, such as anybody doing a YouTube show that says bad things about Trump. Once these establishment institutions and their representatives are neutered, those of us on the left will be next. Chris Hedges says those of us on the left to make it clear that James Comey, John Bolton, and George Soros are not left. They are part of the liberal ruling elite. The memo instructs federal law enforcement agencies to detain, question, and interrogate individuals suspected or accused of political violence or lawlessness. It demands the IRS strip organizations of tax-exempt status if they are seen by the state as directly or indirectly financing political violence or domestic terrorism, and report them to the Department of Justice for investigation. And that's another key aspect of this, is stripping organizations that, are the funding, but sometimes even just the information that can be used by you and me to fight against these fucking totalitarian clowns. If you strip them of tax-exempt status and quote-unquote investigate them, that is a lot of impacts. One, obviously, it's, they lose 25, 30, maybe more percent of their income each year if they're not tax-exempt. But beyond that, that fact that the government has stripped them of tax-exempt status serves as a nice big red flag for other people that might help fund them. Oh, you're dangerous. Oh, you're scary. Oh, you're one of the bad people. I, of course, have had that scarlet letter on me ever since I had a TV show at RT. But they can use a variety of things to put that scarlet letter on you. It doesn't have to just be working at a certain TV station or something. There's plenty of different ways that they can try to make sure that everyone will, turn against you. That people, to this day, if you're just learning about my show and you go and you Google me, I'm sure maybe the first thing, but one of the top 3 things you're going to get is a Wikipedia entry that's filled with falsehoods about me. You're going to get a New York Times article that's filled with absolute garbage about me that's fake. And that's by design. You want to make sure that new people are not finding out about this person or this organization or this website and thinking it might be good. He says, I spent 2 years with the architects of our emergent fascism when I wrote my book, American Fascists, The Christian Right and the War on America. And by the way, in case you think this is put out by some Christian hater, Chris Hedges is Christian. He is an ordained pastor. So American Fascists, The Christian Right and the War on America. In that book, he spent months, years, he says, speaking and to these characters. And he says, they do not hide their vision for America. They plan to make the legal system subservient to dogma. We've seen that with Donald Trump, right? They hate the secular humanist society based on science and reason. And this is very important in the attacks on science you've seen recently. And it's not just them. There are others as well. I don't know if I guess he would put Peter Thiel and Musk in this kind of Christian right, the right group that wants to create a totalitarian Christian right, Christian nationalist government. Peter Thiel has led the attack on funding people who basically just create enough doubt about science that no one knows what's up and what's down, and scientists are all evil. That is really an important aspect of this. They dream of making the 10 Commandments the basis of the legal system, which is hilarious because if you read the 10 Commandments recently, have you looked at them? Just about all of them not illegal right now. Like, you could totally covet your neighbor's ass. Not only can you covet your neighbor's ass, you can Jesus, why can't I say covet? Fucking shit, goddamn covet. I covet those who can speak correctly. Not only can you covet your neighbor's ass, you can covet your neighbor's wife's ass, which is also in the 10 Commandments. None of those things are illegal. The only one's illegal is killing people. You still can't kill people. But all the rest, I think you're fine. Respect your elders in there. They plan to teach creationism or intelligent design in public schools and make education overtly Christian. They brand the LGBTQ community, immigrants, secular humanists, feminists, Jews, Muslims, criminals, quote unquote criminals, and those dismissed as nominal Christians, meaning Christians who do not embrace the fundamentalist interpretation, all as deviants. Do you need that list again? Let me know if any of you are on this list, because if so, I'm going to report you. Anyone who's in the LGBTQ community, immigrants or immigrant-friendly people, secular humanists, feminists, Jews, Muslims, criminals, or those accused of being criminals, even if you're not, and those dismissed as nominal Christians. Those are all deviants. These deviants are worthy not only of being silenced, imprisoned, or killed, are worthy of being silenced, imprisoned, or killed. They condemn government assistance programs, especially for the poor. Actually, this is also the heart of why we have paid healthcare in this expensive healthcare in this country and other countries don't. It's part of a eugenics effort. They do not like system, parts of the system that are like food stamps, public schools, free healthcare, anything that is given to give the poor some kind of leg up, some kind of ability to survive, because the hope by these monsters, he calls them Christian fundamentalists, but I don't know, you'd see a lot of Israel and Zionist lunatics signing up for most of this platform. The reason they don't want any of that, like healthcare, is because it might help poor people to survive, Black people to survive, immigrants to survive, and they don't want any of that. And if you actually look at the history of universal healthcare in this country, there was a big fight. I've covered it on the show before, to create universal healthcare, free healthcare, back in the early to mid, not even mid, but mainly early 1900s. The reason it lost was because of an effort by eugenicists to stop free healthcare because it would help Black people survive in this country. And the hope was that Black people would die. That's what they were. That's the reason you have high medical care, healthcare costs right now is because of that. You have that to thank. They call for the federal government to be reduced to protecting property rights, homeland security, and waging war. They want church organizations to run social welfare agencies in schools. And as we've seen, church organizations running social welfare agencies is a tiny percent of what's needed in this country to actually take care of those chewed up by our capitalist shit show. They demand the expansion of the death penalty to include moral crimes, quote unquote, including apostasy, blasphemy, sodomy. So if you're gay, you could be executed. Some of the earlier laws in states, and I think in some of them they're still illegal, or it was until recently, like Virginia. I think maybe it's changed, or maybe it's still illegal technically. Either way, it wasn't. If it is no longer illegal, it wasn't until a few years ago that sodomy was still on the books as illegal, and the way they defined it was any sexual act that's not for procreation. So that means every BJ that's ever been given or received in the state of Virginia was illegal, was highly illegal. And it goes both ways, right? Also, witchcraft as well as abortion. I mean, I consider abortion witchcraft, so let's not be redundant here, Chris Hedges. Okay, Abortion is witchcraft. And abortion would be treated as murder, so therefore you could execute the mother. They call for the return to a white male patriarchy by mythologizing the past. They demand women be denied contraception, access to abortion, and equality under the law. The only legitimate voices in public discourse and the media to them are Christian. So it sounds like a great time. All of this sounds like if all of that happens in the United States, we're in for fun times. Do you think the liberal America will ever stand up at any point against any of this? Or do you think it's just going to be yard signs, just all the way to the end? Like, please stop executing people for blowjobs. It'll say on the little sign they put in their front yard. I'm putting this sign right here. It says, I would prefer you don't execute the blowjobbers. Please do not execute any more rug munchers. That's what the signs the liberals put out will say. Power in the age of Trump is based on blind personal loyalty. Rights are privileges that can be instantly revoked. As we saw, Marco Rubio wanted to revoke passports for thought crimes. Lies replace truth. Opinions replace facts. History is erased and rewritten. Hence why they want to erase critical race theory, the idea that race and racism is pivotal in the creation and history of America. Oh my God, they can't have that. So let's rewrite the history books. The cult of leadership replaces politics. And by the way, how much of that paragraph sounds exactly like 1984? Lies replace truth. Opinion replaces fact. History is erased and rewritten. Paranoia grips the ruling elite, composed of narcissists, buffoons, and gangsters, I call them idiopaths, who feed off conspiracy theories. They see mortal enemies everywhere and live in a hermetically sealed, non-reality-based universe. They live in a false reality, which is interesting because they're also trying to create a false reality for all of us. They want you to think there is a massive wave of left-wing violence in America when it's almost non-existent. They want you to think that there is no right-wing mass violence in America when almost all of the mass killings are by right-wingers. They want you to think that there is no U.S. military mass killing wave across America when the latest numbers show that 32% of all mass shooters are veterans of the U.S. military, and most of those, or almost all of those, are never reported by the mainstream media. That research being done by David Swanson over at World Beyond War. 32%, a third of all mass shooters are veterans or have veteran experience. I think for some of them, it's like we're in ROTC or something like that, but some sort of connection to the U.S. military. They are creating a pseudo-democracy populated, we do not have democracy, populated by pseudo-legislators. The U.S. government does, the Congress does very little. If you look at what Congress passes, it's just whatever aligns with corporate America. Pseudo-courts, pseudo-journalists, ain't that the truth? Pseudo-intellectuals, pseudo-Christians, and pseudo-citizens. Our anemic and calcified democracy, including our bankrupt liberal institutions, cannot defeat them. Fascists are the swamp creatures that rise up out of all failed democracy. And we are without a doubt a failed democracy. We do not have a democracy any longer. These things we see, like the gerrymandering fights in Texas, they are just the cutting away the remnants of what democracy there is, cutting away the last vestiges of our completely shredded and tattered democracy. Even if our federal elections were legitimate, which there's no proving they're legitimate because literally we're voting on black box machines that we can never hold accountable. So even if they were legitimate, you vote once every 4 years for the presidency. You vote once every 2 years for the House. That's not real democracy. We're putting in place whoever it is who spent the most money on the fucking campaign. That's who gets into that office. 80% of the time in the Senate and 90% of the time in the House. And the only reason it's as low as 80 in the Senate is because of name recognition. So if you've been there 20 years, you don't have to spend as much money and you can still get reelected, which kind of doesn't even count. But 85% of the time, the guy that spends the most, man or woman, is going to win that election. It's not a real election. It's a money-bought election. It's whoever's spending the most. And the other aspect of that fucking no one mentions except this guy is 100% of the time the two candidates who spend the most amount of money will win the election. Meaning, if you are a third-party candidate and you do not have the amount of money that the other two candidates have, you will never, 0% chance, win the election. And that is 100% of the time the third party does not have the millions of dollars to spend on winning the election. It is a meaningless election for those who can spend the most money electing themselves. So the question is now, after you've heard everything Chris Hedges had to say in that article, will we fucking stand up in this country? Will we fight back and join against the actual enemies, the people actually ruining your lives, the ruling elite writ large? As long as you're fighting against others, as long as you're furious about trans people or trans bathrooms, or you're furious about immigrants or whatever little segment of society, then you're just playing into there. It's exactly what the ruling elite wants. Just keep fighting. Elon Musk literally, after Charlie Kirk was killed, Elon Musk literally posted, like, everyone should rise. You should rise up and get him. He knows he's the ruling elite. He knows the richest fucking guy in the world, or second richest now. And so he just wants us all fighting. That's good for him. Because when people aren't fighting, what are we doing? We're uniting against fucking him. We're uniting against Peter Thiel. We're uniting against Larry Ellison. We're uniting against the richest sociopaths in the world. And they can't have that. So, of course, hate trans people. Hate gay people. Hate women, for fuck's sake. Specifically non-white women. Woo! They are the worst. Hate them all. Because then the ruling elite get exactly what they want and can keep going with the divide and conquer.